Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Maller-Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnerships with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. Smithville Fiber Internet Security Solutions and Voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Bunger and Robertson Attorneys at Law, utilizing 75 years of experience, knowledge, and resources to help individuals and families recover in personal injury matters. Information at lawbr.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. Former President Trump continues to receive the backing of many in the rural community despite the numerous lawsuits and indictments he's facing.
It's all just a scheme to get rid of him. And in my opinion, it only makes him stronger.
Trump won Indiana in the 2020 election with 57% of the vote. Fewer than 1% of the state's population is transgender, but finding acceptance in a right-leaning state hasn't been easy.
It was very confusing for me as a little kid because no one was explaining to me why I was being attacked.
A number of anti-trans legislation has been introduced at the State House. And a study group has presented Indiana University with a plan for the future of the Kinsey Institute, and we got an exclusive look at the report. We'll have these stories, plus the latest news from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Almost a year ago, the state passed legislation that barred Indiana University from using state funds to support the Kinsey Institute. A working group was tasked with coming up with recommendations on how it would like to see IU proceed with the future of the Kinsey Institute. Now, last week, it sent its report to the university. Our Ethan Sandwise obtained a copy of the report and its recommendations and has the story.
The Kinsey Institute Special Working Group concluded that IU could comply with state law without separating the institute into a 501c3 nonprofit. The university initially planned to separate from Kinsey after a budget amendment by a lawmaker who accused the institute of harboring pedophiles. No evidence was presented for those charges.
Who knows what they're still hiding? Could they be hiding child predators?
After the IU Board of Trustees postponed a November vote on converting the institute into a nonprofit, Provost Rahul Srivastava appointed the working group to gather input and issue recommendations. The working group noted frustration among Kinsey affiliates with what they see as the university's failure to push back against misinformation.
Truthfully, if I was on the job market right now and I wasn't here, I would not come here. And Kinsey was my dream job.
The document is intended to shape their proposals to the trustees at the end of the month. The report suggests an accounting solution devised by the committee and reviewed by IU's audit firm. It recommends postponing consideration of a separate 501c3 until after the first audit review. Additionally, the group recommends the university do more to stop the spread of misinformation and to protect Kinsey affiliates.
The faculty and staff and students at the Institute have suffered indescribable harassment.
Some of the listening sessions questioned whether the working group's feedback will be heeded.
And then who will see the proposal before it goes forward to the Board of Trustees? Will it be seen by the working group? That might be a silly question, but is it likely to be the same proposal that was put forward in November? Will the proposal be open?
The working group says it has not seen the original proposal submitted to the IU board. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Ethan Sandwise.
All right, we're joined now by Ethan Sandwise, of course, covering for us. Thanks for being here. So you've reported the working group's findings are recommendations, but not a binding decision. So why are these documents so important?
Well, the working group report was never supposed to go public. Originally the plan was that this would just be sent to the Board of Trustees for their consideration. So back in November, when this decision was initially postponed, President Pamela Whitten said that this would give the university more time to consult with these stakeholders at Kinsey. But if the working group's findings remain confidential, there's really no way to compare it against what they actually end up deciding to do at the Board of Trustees meeting. So since the report is now public, people can actually make that comparison.
So is there anything in this group's report that's surprising, anything kind of changing the game here?
I think the biggest surprise there, or the biggest game changer there, is that the group says they have developed a plan that would allow Kinsey to remain compliant while not separating from IU. Now, back in November, one of the most contentious parts of the university's plan was this separation plan to turn it into a 501c3 nonprofit. There are 3 CPAs on this working group. They also ran it by IU's auditors. I think it's also important to mention that as the working group document says, there were differences of opinion here, but they felt confident enough that this solution would work that they submitted it to the university.
All right, Ethan, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. Now we're joined by Callie Lichter for more headlines from around the state. Hi, Callie.
Hi, Joe. Expansion of the Monroe County Convention Center took another step forward this week. The county commissioners unanimously accepted a draft interlocal agreement between the city of Bloomington and Monroe County Wednesday, about a week after the county council did so.
I think this is reflective of sort of turning the page and really progress being made, our communications with the new administration, new city council members.
The interlocal requires signatures from the county council and commissioners, as well as the mayor and city council members. The current draft is different from the one the last mayor and city council signed last year. Language that outlined appointments to a commission overseeing innkeepers' tax revenues has since been removed.
A good contract is worth its weight in gold, so we want to get it right, but I think we're all ready to see this move forward.
City council members could approve the document as soon as their next meeting on February 28th. Democratic candidates for Bloomington's District 5 City Council seat will meet Saturday to make their case. It's a chance for candidates Jenny Stevens, Jason Moore, and Courtney Daly to answer precinct committee member questions about how they would address local issues if chosen. They are vying to succeed Shruti Rana, who took office in January but resigned this month. Democrats will hold a caucus on March 2nd to fill the seat. Indiana University is offering free tax assistance for low-income locals. Monroe County residents and IU students making less than $60,000 a year qualify for the service through the Maurer School of Law. Volunteers will help people file 2023 federal and state taxes on Monday and Tuesday nights. People interested should bring relevant income forms like a W-2, their social security card, and an official ID. The service runs until March 26th, but will shut down during IU's spring break. A new bookstore is scheduled to open in downtown Bloomington. The nonprofit will be volunteer-led and feature highly curated sections and host events for the community. Grace Morocco has the story.
We will finally have storage space for all of the chairs, but these are some of our backup chairs.
As a teenager in Muncie, a bookstore is where Mia Beach found refuge.
That is the place that I spent a lot of my afternoons and a lot of my lunch hours, and it was the last place that I was before I ran away from home. It did offer this quiet place to just be with all these books that I had never experienced before.
Now, she is helping to create a bookstore of her own. Red Bud Books is set to open on March 9th on West Kirkwood Avenue. The bookstore will focus on engaging the Bloomington community through specialized book collections, reading groups, film screenings, and various speakers and events.
It's not about putting all the books in that would be in a standard bookstore. I want to pick and choose books where even if I would enter a bookstore as someone who works in theater and performance, I would say, oh my God, I didn't even think about this one.
Construction is ongoing, but the bookstore has already hosted several community events such as film screenings and speaker events. Beach says the space is needed.
We really feel like it's important to create a spot where people can come together and there's just a shared love of ideas as a starting point.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Grace Morocco.
A farm in Brown County that came under fire for its owner's connections to white nationalist groups has been sold. Sarah Dye and Doug Mackey sold Schooner Creek Farm earlier this month after listing the property on Facebook Marketplace. Activists called for Schooner Creek to be banned from selling goods at the Bloomington Farmers Market in 2019 after Dye's connections to a white supremacist group were made public. Dye and Mackey did not return to the farmers market after the outcry in 2019. And Joe Schooner also sold their coffee business called Above Time Coffee Roasters.
All right, Callie, thanks so much. Well, 2024 is set to be a record-breaking year for voter turnout in the presidential election, and with Republican primaries taking place, Many are wondering the hows and whys of one of the largest voter bases in the country, the rural vote. Clayton Baumgarth set out to talk with experts and some voters about why one name, Trump, is the choice of so many in rural Indiana.
A lot of issues are on the minds of voters this year, including international affairs, abortion rights, climate change, and even democracy itself, the fates of which seem to hang on the outcome of the 2024 presidential election.
There's a cost of living issue, and there's no reason that, we should be living paycheck to paycheck. There's lots of people that make very good money, and they still live paycheck to paycheck.
And just like any other election year, Americans will be presented with two candidates by the time November rolls around. Though he's not the official candidate yet, many rural voters have their hearts set on one former office holder.
Definitely be supporting Trump in this election. It's definitely well worth. I supported him in 2020 when he ran. He has said some things I have not always agreed with, but
Much has happened to former President Donald Trump since he and President Joe Biden last faced off in 2020. Trump lost the election, though still says he won it, and has since been faced with 4 criminal indictments in 4 different cities totaling 91 felony counts.
It's all just a scheme to get rid of him. And in my opinion, it only makes him stronger. It only made me want to vote for him more and more, mainly for the fact that he is going through everything.
Biden, on the other hand, has been criticized for his handling of the rise in inflation, the Israel-Hamas war, and unfulfilled promises, including the cancellation of student loan debt and the codifying of Roe v. Wade. And yes, America will likely be choosing between 2 candidates whose mental and physical health statuses have been heavily questioned, with the 81-year-old Biden and 77-year-old Trump being the oldest presidential nominees of all time.
A lot of people say they don't want to vote because there's nobody even fit to vote for. Which, as an American citizen, you have to vote. You look in countries where you're not even allowed to vote. You got to stand up for your rights.
At the state level, the Republican Party candidates will be running on the issues they hear about most from their constituents, both rural and urban.
You hear a lot about inflation. You hear a lot about the price of goods being out of control. Obviously, people always care about economic opportunity, ability to get jobs, economic progress. And the more and more we get out on the road, obviously, the border.
At the moment, Elsner says the party hasn't thrown its support to any candidate specifically, saying that it's up to the primary voters to tell them who they want to run for the presidency.
I'm always appreciative of the candidates that step forward and run. Obviously, President Trump has had early success in both Iowa and New Hampshire. And so we'll see how that continues. I know Nikki Haley is still at it.
Even though the Republican playing field is still technically wide open, the Indiana Republican Party leader says he would place his bets on Trump becoming the nominee for president.
Just on the momentum from Iowa and New Hampshire, it's certainly looking like President Trump has a lot of momentum and is moving forward with that momentum and is clearly resonating with voters. So we'll see where that ends up.
And while it may be surprising to Democratic voters, many of Trump's most devoted fans have not had their opinions changed by the numerous court cases and indictments.
The fact that he's being targeted, the fact that this fits actually his narrative, and so a large percentage of his base certainly is actually mobilized further because of this, so it doesn't demobilize them.
A recent poll done by Colby College shows 61% of rural Trump voters believe the January 6 charges are, quote, phony, made-up charges to keep him out of office. 92% say a conviction would not change their opinion on the matter. That same poll and Wolf suggests that the key to understanding and perhaps even shifting the rural vote comes down to realizing that much of rural America fears that their way of life is changing, or even that they have been forgotten by the current administration.
We're kind of falsely saying, well, it's economic dislocation, or it's culture wars, or it's the drug addiction. We're losing out on really identifying what the divide is and what people's real political beliefs are that are based on identity, not necessarily one single issue.
Wolf believes that if other candidates or parties could give stronger voice to small communities on a national scale, it could be enough to turn the tide of the election.
Democrats need to make the argument that that the rural way of life is something that America needs.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Clayton Baumgarth.
Now, according to that same Colby College poll, just 23% of rural voters were familiar with Biden's efforts to rebuild roads and bridges. Around 41% reported hearing nothing at all about investments into broadband internet. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. A Senate bill that opponents say would rewrite how tenure is defined by universities found new life in a House committee. And we talk with transgender people about their decisions to come out and living as trans in a conservative state. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
I have always believed that people are at the heart of every story we tell.
Any story or interview that makes people who watch it say, you know, I hadn't thought of it in that way. That for me is gold.
I like to be able to leave the viewer with some sort of emotion, whether it's outrage, whether it's someone overcoming long odds, telling a big story through an individual story.
What makes the NewsHour different is that we have time to be thoughtful about the stories that we tell, the voices that we intend to elevate.
I know the role that good journalism plays in making all of us feel more connected to each other, in helping all of us understand each other a little bit better. I see this as a mission, and I see this as a service.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Well, lawmakers have less than a month to wrap up this year's session at the Statehouse. One bill getting a lot of attention has been Senate Bill 202. Critics say it would functionally remove tenure past the House Committee on Education on a party line vote Wednesday. Several universities and faculty members have testified against the bill because of changes it makes to faculty discipline, university leadership, classroom teaching, and tenure. The committee took no testimony but struck down an amendment that would have removed the section on tenure.
I have been contacted by a provost of one of our leading institutions. I've been contacted by president of board of trustees and in one of our leading institutions who have actually supported the language that you're attempting to delete.
Boehning did not specify who he had contacted. Ball State and Ivy Tech have criticized other parts of the bill, but refrained from commenting on tenure. Purdue has so far refused to comment. The bill must still pass a vote in the House to become law. A Senate committee Wednesday unanimously passed a bill that would define and ban anti-Semitism in state public education institutions. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Violet Cumber-Weiland reports the amended bill takes out a portion of language around the definition of anti-Semitism that initially drew controversy.
The amended bill uses language from the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism, but takes out references to the IHRA directly and its examples of anti-Semitism. The definition itself initially drew controversy, as some said the examples in the definition too closely conflated criticism of the State of Israel with anti-Semitism.
IHRA and that version of the bill still allow for criticism of Israel in the same way that we would criticize any government for policies with which we disagree, including our own.
He adds the pre-amended version of the bill was necessary to define and combat anti-Semitism. Proponents of the amended bill say removing these examples from the definition prevents free speech from being limited while still combating anti-Semitism.
It equips our administration with the necessary tools to combat anti-Semitism effectively and educate our community.
For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Violet Cumber-Weiland.
The bill now moves to the Senate floor for consideration. A bill to tackle Indiana's literacy crisis is headed to the governor's desk. The measure passed by the House works to identify students in grades 4 through 8 who aren't reading at their level. The bill mandates the Department of Education to develop guidance for schools to help them improve reading skills.
So our middle school and high school teachers are certainly, as they should be, echoing that statement of we have students not reading in our classrooms and yet we're not sure exactly what to do.
If signed by the governor, the Department of Education would begin that work in the 2024-25 school year. Nearly 24 local ordinances, including in Bloomington, that ban the sale of dogs in pet stores will be eliminated under a bill that's a step away from the governor's desk. The bill would require pet stores to register with the state before selling dogs, and it only allows them to sell dogs from breeders and brokers who meet a canine care certification program developed by Purdue. While legislation in recent years has targeted trans youth, older transgender adults contend with both growing visibility and rising hostility. There are around 25,800 transgender adults in Indiana. According to the UCLA Williams Institute, just under half of 1% in the state. Ethan Sandwise speaks with Hoosiers about living trans in a conservative state.
So I thought, well, God, this is just a sin, and I need to try harder, and it's just me. And it wasn't until later that I realized that this has been through history.
Jones grew up in rural Brown County long before sex and gender were discussed in public. She came of age in a religious community and had nobody with whom she could share her experience.
My earliest memories, this was a battle. I mean, 3 years old, this was a battle. Just no one knew.
Rebecca Haviland was raised by a conservative family in Salem.
It was very confusing for me as a little kid because no one was explaining to me why I was being attacked.
For transgender youth living before the internet, there was hardly any information available for them to understand their identity. They scoured dictionaries, textbooks, and porno magazines.
After a football game, I'd go home and cry because I was wearing pads rather than being part of the cheer squad.
Pedrell is the first openly elected transgender official in Indiana history. Like Jones, she was married before her transition and presenting as male. Others like Haviland risked harassment and abuse by presenting openly as trans from a young age.
Even if only privately to themselves, they intuitively understand this is just what the kid is. Even if they don't understand beating the child without ever explaining why.
Researchers coined the term transgender in 1965, but until the 1990s they were mainly referred to as transsexual. Transgender Hoosiers sought community within gay and lesbian spaces in cities such as Indianapolis, Bloomington, and South Bend.
We had a bar called Bullwinkle's. Before it moved to West 5th, West 3rd, it was downtown in a little building, and I would go there.
These encounters with queer culture were often discreet. Trans adults worried about the reaction from their communities, especially in rural parts of Indiana.
My ex-wife had told a girlfriend of ours, and no one knew. And she was drunk at a party, and it was just too juicy for her to contain, and so she told everyone.
For transgender people in Indiana prisons, the situation could be even more dire. Haviland spent nearly 30 years incarcerated. Until the 2012 Prison Rape Elimination Act, all trans women were housed with male inmates, a practice that still continues in some places today.
Sometimes you would have staff or gang members like, okay, let's move this trainee over from this working housing unit, put them in a dorm controlled by their gang, just for sport.
Despite the risks, many trans Hoosiers choose to live openly as their gender, navigating life among both left-leaning and conservative friends.
I've done my best, especially since getting elected in 2019, to be out and representing in places that aren't always so familiar.
After she was outed, Jones opened Rachel's Cafe, one of the most visibly queer spaces in Bloomington. She continues to live among friends and neighbors she's known her whole life.
Things have changed so much, and growing up thinking how my life would be ruined if anyone knew in Brown County, and now I walk down the street and somebody honks that's driving by because they're a friend. Who'd have thought?
I believe that in their minds, I'm kind of their token. You know, trans people in general are like, make them feel uncomfortable, but they're okay with me.
Jones and Haviland describe acceptance by friends and family who still espouse transphobic ideas on social media. Haviland says that in spite of greater visibility, not much has changed from the perspective of a trans woman living without secure housing.
I never experienced so much bigotry, so much conservative bigotry in Bloomington until I was out pounding the street every single day, trying to get a job.
The political landscape is changing. While transgender Hoosiers are living visibly in a way that many never felt possible, recent legislation in Indiana and other states has them worried for the future.
I've thought of places out of the country that would be a place to go, but I have a community here, and a lot of my friends are politically right-wing.
But even though they've thought about leaving, many would rather stay and fight.
Well, of course I have, and then on the other hand, of course, why should I? I mean, I've been a pride warrior my whole life, and I got the scars to prove it.
Pedrell is now running for Indiana's Senate. She wants young transgender people to enter politics, not just to defend their own rights, but to advocate for causes they care about beyond their gender identity.
I love this community too much to leave here. I love this state too much to leave here.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Ethan Sandweiss.
Legislation in Indiana in the past few years has banned gender-affirming care for state inmates. A federal court struck down a 2023 law that would have banned affirming care for minors. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Maller-Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnerships with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. Smithville Fiber Internet Security Solutions and Voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Bunger & Robertson Attorneys at Law, utilizing 75 years of experience, knowledge, and resources to help individuals and families recover in personal injury matters. Information at lawbr.com. And by WTIU members. Thank you.